Alright, welcome and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. So, this weekend we have George Liddard versus Dario Morello. Hope I pronounced his name correctly. So, this this fight, okay, I want to say one thing about this fight. I understand why it's been made, okay? I understand it's for a European belt. I understand that George Liddard is sort of, vacated the British belt now. He's done at the British scene and he's moving into the European level, right? At the end of the day, you can only beat who's in front of you, right? So if Dario Morello's been put in front of him for the European belt, that's who he's gonna fight, okay? Now, George Liddard is one of my favorite fighters within the British scene. Okay, I really like him. I like his style. I got a thing about a fighter who can use a double jab well. He's like an educated kind of pressure fighter. He's not a full-out pressure fighter, but he does apply insane pressure when he gets you on the ropes, and especially just commanding that center ring. He's always throwing hooks to the body and head, and especially he's not exactly feather fisted. He's got 8 knockouts in 14 fights, couple of knockdowns, even the people he hasn't stopped, and overall I think he's relatively exciting, right? He may not be a knock him out artist, but he's got enough there that makes you excited, right? Dario Morello on the other side. Okay, so before this week, and before I had a look into this fight, I didn't know who he was, right? I was wondering, is he somebody who's low-key done really well, and I just don't know who he is? He's 26-1. Is he a guy with a built-up record? Who is this guy? And I was sort of thinking, is he a diamond in the rough? Is he someone who I'm going to look at and go, oh, he could be the next big thing? No. No, I don't think he is. So I didn't know who he was. I'm not going to lie to you and pretend that I knew all these things about him. I had a look at his losses. The only name I recognized on his entire record was actually his loss. I can't remember the guy's name, but I just know I remember the guy fighting Chris Congo and Chris Congo knocking him out. But I remember, didn't remember, looked at his record, went, I do recall that. So, the only name I recognize is his loss. His wins, there's no one on there. Okay, there's no one impressive, no one who sticks out to me. And it's just basically, it's a record for the tomato cans. So I'd say to look at his last 3 fights and see what he's about, right? What attributes he bring, what challenge are you going to bring to Liddard, and, is there anything there? I don't think there's anything there, right? The guy has 1 knockout in 26 wins, right? So he hasn't got the power, right? He's not exactly got stellar footwork. He's not stuck in the mud. He's not slow. He's not cumbersome, but his footwork's not great, right? And his defense is weird, right? So anyone who's going to watch anything before this weekend, go and watch his last fight, right? He was kind of fighting a bit of a kind of like a pressure fighter guy. Every time he gets against the ropes, right, he kind of tries to do the shoulder roll like the Philly shell defense, right? But he just doesn't move. He just sort of covers his body, but his head is just exposed. And he doesn't move his head. So he's one of those guys, when he gets against the rope, he doesn't even try to lean back, which you shouldn't lean back, but at least it's something. The guy just stands there stationary. So I'm watching that thinking, if that's Liddard against this guy, he's just going to ping the guy's head off. So, he hasn't got power. He hasn't got footwork, and his style of fighting. I thought the fact he had no knockouts, he was going to be a bit of a dancer. He tries to get stuck in, but there's just no power there. Like when he throws hooks, right? It doesn't seem to move or deter anybody. Liddard throws a hook, it moves them, it deters them. It's almost like I would say Morello punches on the target, whilst Liddard punches through the target. That's the main difference between these two fighters in that way. But if he's going to try and get stuck in against Liddard, this is an easy night for Liddard. So. Then like I said, you compare records, right? You look at George Liddard's records. His last 2 fights, Kieran Conway, Tyler Denny, 2 solid British domestic level fighters, right? They may not be European or British or world level, right? But at least they're the solid British and have fought at European level, won the European belt, right? This guy's got no one like that on his record, right? So it's one of those fights. If I'm going to give a percentage, I'm saying 85% here to Liddard, 15% to Morello, 10% because he's an unknown entity to me, 5% for what I've actually seen. So if I'd seen a lot more fights in him, I'd probably say 95 Liddard. I think this is going to be an easy night. I don't see this going the distance, but if it does, okay, the guy's never been stopped. But yeah, I see Liddard getting rid of this guy pretty quickly and pretty early. I'm going to go between rounds 1 and 4. And even though it sounds like I'm kind of, complaining about the fight, I'm not really. I understand why it's there. You can only beat who's in front of you. Um, if that's who he's got to beat for the European belt, then screw it, win the European belt. Maybe fight another person at the European level, and then move on to the going into the fringe world level and world level scene. At the end of the day, Liddard can move decently fast because there's no one really at the middleweight division, right? We'll talk about this more on Saturday because I'm going to do a reaction video. I'm assuming Lillard's going to win, right? But let's talk about who he could fight on Saturday at the middleweight division, right? Because really, off the top of my head, apart from Carlos Adames, who I think is moving up, the division's pretty well open, right? So they can move Liddard a bit faster after he's won this belt, right? But again, not hating the fight. I understand why it's being made. I understand why he's fighting this Morello guy. But I'm seeing an easy night for Liddard. So probably a guaranteed knockout or stoppage. So we'll see what happens there. Undercard is not too interesting to me. You got Ty Aiton on the undercard. She's looks like here she's fighting for the Commonwealth featherweight title. I don't know who she's fighting. I quite like Ty. I think she's pretty good. I like her style, but again, I don't really know who's in a division apart from Serrano. There is that Tiara. Can't remember her name. The woman who beat Sky Nicholson. She's in the same weight class. That would be quite fun. And the thing is, Ty has a really good style. She's already quite there. And the thing is with female fighters, there's not enough in the divisions anyway, right? And also, if you look at the difference between the women fighters and the men fighters, the women fighters do move a lot faster, right? So we probably can't get it to, world levels like in the next fight or two, see where she goes. But either way, I'll probably tune in to watch her fight. I do like her style, but just hopefully her next opponent's going to be someone who's live. Maybe her opponent is. I just don't know who she is. And then we have Jimmy Sains versus Tom Crowling. So I didn't recognize Crowling until I looked at his record and I saw he fought Aaron Brown. So that is a fight, by the way, I recommend anybody go and watch. It is a really fun, exciting fight. But I remember watching that fight. I can't remember what card it was on or if it was on if it was the main card of prelims, but I just remember put on the boxing on, that fight came on and it just got me going for the rest of the night, right? It's one of those fights that boxing fan or casual, you'll lick it up and you enjoy it. But yeah, saying this, I think Jimmy Sains will win. I know Jimmy Sains' last fight, he got a mandatory split decision, but the opponent he fought was pretty decent. I think he'll beat Tom Crowling. I guess it's just to see if he actually does it or not, but I think Jimmy Sains is going to win. I can't lie, I'm not too excited about the undercard. I just want to see George Liddard beat Morel and become European champion. But either way, still some fights on this weekend. I think the Jimmy Sains one will be the most learning curve we'll get here. George Liddard is more just to get him the European belt and see where he goes from there. So like I said, I'll be doing a post-fight reaction on Saturday night or Sunday morning, one or the other, just to talk about mainly where Liddard goes from here. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the weekend of the fights. Let me know how you all think. Like, share, subscribe, do you want to do, share the video. And yeah, until the next time, I'll probably, one of the fights I actually need to talk about, which will be in my next video, will be the Lopez and Romero fight. So yeah, I'll post that soon. So yeah, like I said, like, share, subscribe, and yeah, boom shakalaka, go on. See you guys later.